There's a shipping lane at the very top of the world that's worth $1.4 trillion to whoever controls it. Trump wanted it, Canada claims it, and the country that just settled that fight isn't even in North America. By the end of this, you'll see why the Arctic is shaping up to be the most important economic battleground of the next 50 years, and why America is quietly, dangerously losing ground. If this channel has ever shifted the way you think about money and power, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop a comment. Do you think the US is slipping in global trade? After this, your answer might surprise you. The Northwest Passage cuts through Canada's Arctic archipelago, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans across the top of the world. For centuries, it was frozen and deadly. Ships tried, failed, and sank, but climate change changed the rules. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, and the Northwest Passage is now open for a significant part of the year, with the window expanding every season. In practical terms, this is huge. The Northwest Passage trims about 7,000 kilometers off the route between Asia and Europe compared to the Panama Canal, saving roughly $650,000 in fuel per cargo ship per trip. Multiply that by thousands of ships over decades, and the $1.4 trillion figure experts quote starts to make sense. This isn't a geography lesson, it's a massive shift in power measured in trillions. In 2026, that shift is happening right in front of us, faster than most financial analysts are tracking. The US has never officially recognized Canada's claim that the Northwest Passage is Canadian internal waters. Since the 1980s, Washington has treated it as an international strait. Anyone can pass, no Canadian permission needed. Canada says the opposite. These are their sovereign waters. You want to pass? Ask Ottawa first. For decades, this was a quiet paper dispute. Both countries are allies. Confrontation wasn't necessary until Trump's second term. Suddenly, Arctic dominance became a national security priority. His administration's strategy documents flagged the Arctic as critical. Then came the Greenland threats, public, aggressive, and unprecedented. Trump openly considered buying Greenland by force if necessary, while his team dismissed Canada's Arctic claims as illegitimate. The message was unmistakable. America wants the Arctic, and it's no longer being polite. From a financial perspective, if the U.S. had succeeded in declaring the Northwest Passage an international strait, legally or by force, Canada would have lost control of a corridor inside its own territory, meaning no control over traffic, no transit fees, no environmental enforcement, and no leverage in Arctic trade. That was Trump's plan: pressure, intimidation, dominance before Canada could respond. But here's what he didn't see coming. In March 2026, Canada teamed up with 5 Nordic nations, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and Sweden, signing a formal agreement to boost military cooperation and Arctic defense production. Most financial media barely noticed, dismissing it as routine NATO coordination, but that was a huge misread. Norway isn't a minor player. They operate year-round in Arctic conditions that would cripple most other nations' fleets, with military doctrine built around Arctic warfare and a coast guard whose capabilities even U.S. planners respect. Norway has been defending and patrolling Arctic waters independently for decades, so when it signs a joint Arctic defense pact with Canada, this isn't just paperwork, it's a wall going up. Military presence translates to legal leverage, and with Canada now showing that the Northwest Passage is jointly patrolled and defended by Norway and 4 other NATO allies, the American argument that it's an open international strait collapses. You can't claim a route is free for all when a coalition of sovereign NATO nations is actively patrolling it alongside the country that owns it. Mark Carney flew to Bardos, Norway, in March 2026 to observe a Norwegian-led NATO Arctic exercise. The Canadian Prime Minister standing there, watching Arctic military drills, wasn't for show. It was a direct geopolitical message to Washington. Trump's Arctic strategy just ran into a wall he didn't even know was being built. This isn't just military posturing. Every move in the Arctic now has a real financial impact on shipping costs, energy prices, and the cost of everyday goods. Last year, Canada hit the NATO defense target of 2% of GDP, about $63 billion annually. Analysts framed it as Canada finally giving in to Trump, but that's wrong. Canada ramped up defense because Trump's Arctic aggression forced them to face a hard truth. The U.S. couldn't be relied on to protect Canadian territory when it was the one challenging it. When your biggest challenger is also your traditional ally, you have two choices: surrender or rearm. Canada chose to rearm, and crucially, it did so with Norway and the Nordic bloc, not with Washington. That distinction is everything. That $63 billion isn't routine defense spending. It's territorial consolidation, Arctic-specific military infrastructure, icebreakers, patrol vessels, radar upgrades, and joint procurement with Nordic allies. Canada is cementing its presence in a region Trump wanted to contest. Norway is accelerating the process, teaching Canada Arctic maritime operations, year-round Coast Guard work in extreme conditions, emergency towing in icy waters, and rapid response protocols most navies can't even attempt. These aren't abstract ideas. They're practical tools that let Canada enforce sovereignty every single day, regardless of U.S. legal claims. When enforcement capability meets allied military backing, economic leverage shifts, and permanently. The next piece of this story involves Greenland and its response to U.S. aggression. Since Trump began publicly threatening to acquire Greenland, Greenland's authorities didn't turn to Washington or the Pentagon. They went straight to Ottawa for guidance. Over the past 3 years, Greenland and Denmark have been consulting with Canadian officials to create their own version of the Canadian Rangers, a specialized reserve unit maintaining a year-round presence in remote Arctic communities. Those talks intensified once Trump's Greenland ambitions went public. Strategically, Greenland controls the key Atlantic entrance to the Arctic, a choke point critical for any nation projecting naval power north. U.S. planners have known this for decades, which is exactly why Trump wanted it. But his aggressive approach backfired, pushing Greenland and Denmark firmly into Canada and the Nordic security orbit. By the end of 2026, Greenland is expected to have a formal Arctic defense structure modeled on the Canadian Rangers, built with Canadian expertise, coordinated through Nordic frameworks, and explicitly designed to operate independently of U.S. support. For American energy companies, for shipping interests counting on open Arctic routes, and for military planners needing Greenland as a staging point, this is a serious strategic setback. It's not just a hypothetical, it's a realignment that leaves Washington without a central role. Here's why this matters for everyday people: shipping costs. When key trade routes are contested or access becomes conditional, freight rates spike, and so do the prices of everything that travels on them: electronics, auto parts, clothing, consumer goods. The main Asia-Europe lanes currently run through the Suez Canal and around the Cape of Good Hope, both vulnerable and expensive. The Northwest Passage is now the most direct, economically efficient alternative, and as Arctic ice recedes, it becomes viable for more ships, longer each year, and could handle serious volumes within a decade. If Canada enforces sovereign control over the passage, backed by Norway and Nordic allies, it gains the ability to set access rules, environmental standards, traffic regulations, and even transit fees. Consider this: the Panama Canal, with a population of just 4 million, generates about $4 billion a year in transit fees. A commercial-scale Northwest Passage could produce similar revenue for Canada, while giving Ottawa extraordinary leverage over every nation needing that corridor, including the United States. Trump's strategy aimed to keep the route international and open, preserving American commercial and military freedom. But Norway's partnership with Canada now makes that nearly impossible without confronting NATO allies, something Washington can't politically risk. Now here's the bigger picture. Most analysts completely miss that the Canada-Norway alliance isn't just a bilateral deal. It's the foundation for something much larger. Mark Carney calls it a coalition of middle powers, countries that are economically strong, diplomatically credible, and militarily capable, but not locked into the direct US-China rivalry. Canada, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Iceland together represent a combined GDP of roughly $4.2 trillion, with Arctic naval and Coast Guard capabilities unmatched by any nation except Russia in that theater. Their collective diplomatic weight in NATO is enough that any American move against their Arctic position would mean confronting the alliance itself. This is a structural shift. Arctic governance is moving from a US-Canada bilateral model, where America held overwhelming leverage, to a multilateral framework with 5 NATO allies backing Canada. Washington now has to negotiate with a bloc, not pressure a single neighbor. Trump's old playbook, bilateral pressure, tariffs, economic coercion, worked when Canada stood alone. It doesn't work when Canada is backed by Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Iceland, all NATO members the US needs for broader European security priorities. Make no mistake, the US still holds enormous Arctic capabilities. Its military is the most capable in absolute terms, with advanced technology, radar, submarines, and satellite surveillance giving unmatched situational awareness. NORAD and the Joint Canada-US Aerospace Defense Command keep both nations militarily entwined. But here's the reality. Military power and legal sovereignty are different. The US can patrol the Northwest Passage, but it can't declare it international and make that stick. Not with 5 NATO allies formally backing Canada, Greenland, and the Canada-Nordic orbit, and $63 billion in Canadian defense investments consolidating presence on the ground. The window for quietly establishing facts before Canada built its coalition has closed. Trump's Arctic strategy didn't just fail, it created the conditions for its own undoing. The Arctic holds about 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and roughly 30% of its undiscovered natural gas. American energy companies expected access as ice recedes, but Canadian sovereignty means they can't drill where Canada says no. The financial consequences are clear: more expensive shipping, restricted energy, and a United States forced to negotiate from a weaker position on trade, energy, and economic agreements that shape everyday prices. In short, Trump tried to take the Arctic through pressure and intimidation. Canada and Norway quietly built a wall instead. The financial fallout for American trade, energy, and global leverage is only beginning to show. The Arctic was always going to be this century's defining economic battleground. The question was, who would move first? Canada did. Norway backed it. Washington is still figuring out what just happened. If this gives you a new perspective on global trade and power, that's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe now. Every week, we break down the financial moves mainstream media misses, the ones that actually shift markets, reshape trade, and decide where real economic power lies. Drop a comment. Can America recover its Arctic position, or have Canada and Norway locked the door permanently? Share this with anyone who thinks geopolitics doesn't affect their wallet. After watching, they'll see how wrong that assumption is. See you next time.